Blessed Christmas morn, though murky clouds pursue thy way, thy light was born where storm enshrouds nor dawn nor day. Dear Christ, forever here and near, no cradle song, no natal hour, and mother's tear to thee belong. I have said this many times to the rulers of the churches who find themselves fascinated by my wisdom as a man of young age. So I gave them a paradox to resolve. I said to them, speaking of the Christ, "Before Abraham was, I am." This should have silenced the cradle songs, says Mary. No, it shouldn't have, Mary. The cradle songs have their place, though not to celebrate a beginning, but to celebrate a phase shift in thinking, an awakening, a spiritually coming to life. The Christ is God's self-revealing impetus. It has no beginning and no ending. No cradle song must ever be attached to the Christ. However, it is right that we celebrate our dawning awareness of what God is and its reflection in us. The dawning unfolds a phase shift in our perception, both individually and collectively. That's what we want to celebrate. While God expresses in man the infinite idea that is forever developing itself, broadening and rising higher and higher from its boundless basis, the Christ helps us to keep in touch with who and what we are, and helps us to direct our development. What people see standing behind the natural scene symbolizes to some degree their own awakening. They are becoming more fully alive. When people awake from their small-minded thinking, that's a big event. It's worth taking note of. It's worth celebrating. It symbolizes the dawning of a higher spiritual sense of humanity that had always been present, but had been kept dormant by small-minded thinking. People who are stuck in small-minded thinking are functionally dead, as though they were never born. Their greatest need, therefore, is to come alive. The forever Christ, unfolding in consciousness, can heal them. It can bring them alive. The Christ is ever more dawning in the thinking of society as society is discovering its humanity, its spiritual being. This can have enormous and rather beautiful effects. When an advanced idea is born, it can change the world. Abraham had a faint sense of the importance of people being spiritually alive. He perceived some glimpses of this importance when he tried to save the people of the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah from their destruction by an impending cataclysmic natural event. We read in the scriptural story that Abraham found no one spiritually alive in these cities that he could communicate with, who could hear his warning. Consequently, by them not being alive, none of the people had cared to protect their existence. By having never been awake enough as human beings, the people lacked the wisdom to escape the Holocaust of the natural event that the story tells us of. It wasn't that the Christ had been out of reach for them. Instead, by their small-minded thinking, they had lacked the wisdom to reach for it, or even to listen to it when it spoke to them, borne on the wings of angels. Something had been spiritually lacking in their experience. They perished by the consequences. This is typically the case in a small-minded world. It appears that a lot more scientific development had to happen after Abraham's time before society would be able to see more of the Christ, which eventually has happened. We have seen significant scientific development occurring on the path of humanity's awakening, such as by the Pythagorean Society that has put scientific perception on the map in many fields of philosophy, the love of wisdom, such as in metaphysics, music, mathematics, ethics, and politics. And even then, the train didn't stop at this station. Plato and Socrates advanced the scientific focus further, to be able to see with the mind what the eye cannot see, who have both dared move with what they saw. They set up a stage in thinking that soon thereafter enabled the Christ to be seen in the context of spiritual science. This process caused a phase shift. It opened the spiritual realm in a big way through scientific perception. I think I have inspired quite a few people to see with the mind rather than with their eyes. That's how breakthroughs are made with science. Christianity became a new phenomenon along this way. I didn't cause this to happen. The truth has always been there for people to latch onto. I have moved a few people in this direction. I woke a few people up. They moved with me and changed the world. But nothing new was created along this path. A phase shift has happened. Phase shifts will continue to happen. People have become less small-minded. They have become more open-minded. Phase shifts happen when society develops itself further and further. Also, many more phase shifts will yet happen. And I can tell you this, Mary, when these ever greater phase shifts do happen, as society becomes increasingly scientifically open-minded, immensely great things suddenly become possible with a scope that no one can yet even imagine. Momentous breakthroughs are made whenever people begin to discover that they have the power to become the sons of God. It is our own work to assure that this happens. And it is joyous work when people put two and two together and discover with amazement that they have the power to recognize themselves to be the sons of God, and that they always had this power. They begin to wake up. A phase shift happens in their thinking and experience. The Cradle song celebrates this type of phase shift. The Cradle song celebrates an awakening. When people saw me in the cradle and understood the circumstances standing behind the birth process, it became an awakening for them. My awakening began to happen later, when I made those discoveries myself and moved forward with them. Then things began to happen that shouldn't be possible, but did happen. My response had been that I must discover the underlying science. When I saw myself as the Son of God, this opened the scene to bigger questions, like what is the Father? My awakening had something profoundly to do with discovering the Father. The concept of Son implies the existence of a Father, with the Father being God. Who then am I? My discovering the answer became my Cradle song, my becoming awake song. I think most people have those cradle experiences as they begin to celebrate the Father coming to light in their living. I think all people have the power to awake, even while they believe themselves to be totally dead. Some whom I inspired to awake have come to me later and confessed with astonishment that they had always known what I had told them about themselves, but had stubbornly refused to acknowledge it. This means that the phase shift that they have experienced was not so much a phase shift into a new world, as it was a phase shift in house cleaning. For some people, a deep house cleaning literally created a new world for them to live in. Some people came to me afterwards, after their house cleansing awakening, and said that they feel like a new man or woman and live in an entirely different world. I usually ask them in such cases why they would expect anything less. I sometimes add that they have begun on the path of changing the world at large. I tell them that a single individual, being fully awake, in moving with the mind of God, has the power to uplift all nations and create a new and higher stage for civilization than what conventions would dictate. In the story of Abraham defending Sodom and Gomorrah, the critical individual for setting up a higher level stage could not be found. I think the writer of the story was mistaken. I think it is not possible in the divine universe for humanity to be so deadly asleep in dreaming that no one responds when divine science knocks at the door with discoveries of truth. It is not natural for a human being to be oblivious of the truth. This means that it is not natural for a human being not to awake at some point in its individual development. Consequently, it is not possible that the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah would not have rescued themselves. The writer of the story evidently didn't realize this fact in divine science. Sure, great tragedies have happened in history. The city of Troy, for example, was totally destroyed in the Trojan War. But quite a few people who were awake enough also managed to survive. I don't think it is possible for the world in which we live to become so silent that no cradle song will ever be heard again that celebrates a phase shift occurring towards a higher level stage. Millions more may fall by the wayside in their folly of being asleep, but the awakening of humanity out of its slumber will continue unabated, and in due course raise such a chorus of songs that a dead, silent world will never be possible. The cradle song of spiritual awakening will become the anthem of the world. That's inevitable. The ultimate is inevitable. It is a promise by principle. How fast it will happen all depends on how highly people value their life and fight for it, by them becoming more keenly awake. Sooner or later the inevitable will be fulfilled. That's not my promise, Mary. That's God's promise, because God is principle. This is the promise that I give to the world. It is a safe and easy promise for me to make, because I have learned to understand the dynamics of the Father. Whenever you hear the Cradle song and its lyrics being celebrated, remember the divine promise that stands behind it. All future ages will celebrate this in their own inevitable awakening that never ends, just as people in our age have celebrated their own awakening when they saw me in the cradle and began to understand what stood behind the scene. What stood behind the scene was a type of spiritual awakening in society that culminated into a faith shift in people's thinking. As I said before, it began in a big way when the Pythagorean society put scientific thinking on the map. Sure, much of it was wrecked with the Peloponnesian Wars, but Plato and Socrates had also developed it further, so that it couldn't really be reversed again. These pioneers had opened up the scene to individual independent thinking, independent of doctrines and traditions and creeds. Mother picked up on the unfolding scientific openness and moved with it in leaps and bounds, and explored the spiritual dimension with it. She became a pioneer in this field. I emerged in the flow of it. I don't exist as the result of a specific divine intervention. The divine idea man, endowed with the Christ, predates all history. Mother had merely latched onto what had already pre-existed and had carried it forward. She started a revolution with it, a Christ revolution. I became an example of how far one can move on this front at the present stage. In real terms, though, we have barely begun. The world hasn't even seen anything yet of what lies in store for it if it pulls all the stops out and lays aside its small-minded thinking and the fears that flow from it to smother the mind. Very few people today begin to comprehend the vast scope of the unity of God and man, of the infinite and its idea that is together a unit of one and includes all humanity. This is big. Nevertheless, the dawning begins in small steps as people open their mind and visit their humanity. My prayer, which I recommend to everyone, is designed to hasten the process. It is designed to celebrate the Father. It is designed to open the scene up to the Father, to our Father, Mother God, and to our unity with it. That's where we find the Christ, the path for discovering ourselves as an element of the one that is God and man existing as one. When you hear the words of my prayer, Our Father, then expand your perception and see mind, principle, and spirit for Father, and life, truth, and love for Mother. And when you hear the words, Hallowed be thy name, open your eyes and see yourself included in that name. That's the reality of your being. You might as well face reality because your being unfolds in the flow of mind, principle, and spirit, and of life, truth, and love. When you hear the phrase, Thy kingdom come, then celebrate the Father that already is and ever will be, and your awakening to it. Remember, you have the power to be the Son of God, because that's what you already are. This is an aspect of your awakening. The kingdom of God is what you wake up to. Make it your goal to discover what this means, and with it discover yourself. You are the Son of God, in the sense that a month is often referred to as the son of a year. Think of the kingdom of God as the light of your soul, of your humanity. If you do this, you find yourself on track. Then, when you hear the words, "Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven," regard this as your soul urging you to awake and to become alive. Don't play being dead. Don't play even being asleep. God is not dead, nor does God sleep. God is omnipotent. God is supreme. When you follow this path, you will change the world, uplifted, enriched, liberated. You have the power to create a whole new world, a world so brilliant that you won't even bother looking back. When you hear the words, "Give us today our daily bread," think not of poverty, but think of loving, honoring, healing, cherishing. Think of the lateral landscape where humanity is one and one with God. Thus we have the power to create the richest renaissance of all times. This power reflects the divine love by which all human needs are met. Because God and man is one in being, the line of the prayer is a call to us all to let our love shine, for God to shine in humanity. That's our daily bread. God's task is done. No lack is possible there. Here the table is turned. It is our task to avail us of the fullness of God, to brighten our living, experience profound healing, and expand our learning. It is our task to stage the greatest renaissance with the divine resources that we have. In the same context, when you hear the phrase, "Forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors," the prayer is directed to us. A debt is extinguished when the obligation is fulfilled. The obligation that we owe to divine love is fulfilled when we get off the easy chair and put the spade into the ground to build a brighter world for one another than we ever had. The debt that we owe to God is that we meet the human need. If we love God, who is reflected universally, we will strive to assure that this debt to God and to one another becomes extinguished. That's how love, reflected in love, meets all human needs. That is our divine service, our highest form of love. It is not a small task to fulfill the divine obligation, but it is possible to be fulfilled by a human being. It is impossible, however, for an empire to fulfill it. In economics, ideally, a debt must never be repaid, because when it is paid back, society ends up poorer. A debt is only extinguished when civilization is uplifted by it, whereby its objective is fulfilled. It will likely take a long time for society to learn this simple basic lesson in economics. Now what about the concept of temptation? When you speak the phrase, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil, the call again is directed to yourself, not to God. God, divine love, is not a tempter. The bugle call is to yourself, to us all. It is answered when we keep our heads high above the muddy waters of small-minded thinking, which is the only form of evil there is. Delusions by small-minded thinking have tragic effects. When the Christ is knocking at our door, poised to raise us up above the small-minded world where no one has any real power, the prayer is a call to us to end our delusions. But will we answer the call? Now, when we hear the next phrase of the prayer, for thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever, we tend to hear the phrase as a comprehensive affirmation of God. But shouldn't we rather hear it as an affirmation of ourselves, as the sons of God? For thine, for us, is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. The prayer is urging us to get on with the task of becoming fully alive. It is saying to us that there is nothing too great for us to fulfill because we already own the kingdom and the power and the glory and whatever else is required to bring the divine idea man to full fruition. This is so because God is infinite, all power, all life, truth and love, over all and all. And this is what we celebrate when we use the term Christ. When I use the terms Father and Mother referring to God, I see the terms as waymarkers mapped out for us by the eternal Christ on an upwards-oriented path that has no ending, a path towards us becoming ever more fully human and divine. This makes my prayer the ultimate cradle song. The eternal Christ has no cradle. Its cradle song is the song of man, the idea of God, becoming alive in us. On this note, the poem continues. Thou God idea, life encrowned, the Bethlehem babe, beloved, replete, by flesh embound, was but thy shade. Thou gentle beam of living love, and deathless life, truth infinite, so far above all mortal strife, or cruel greed, or earthborn taint, fill us today with all thou art. Be thou our saint, our stay alway.